Good evening and welcome to the InfoPool webinar. We're going to walk you through how to use our new patient information tool called the InfoPool. Just a few housekeeping points before we start. My name's Pauline. I'm a clinical nurse specialist with prostate cancer research. I'm also a nurse specialist in the NHS, working mainly with patients with prostate cancer. During the webinar, there will be polls pop up. Please answer these and you just need to click on the question and we will display the results as we go along. We'll answer your questions at the end of the webinar. Just put your questions into the Q&A box. You'll find the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll email you a certificate of attendance and a link to the webinar later. At the end, when you leave the webinar, there'll be an evaluation form pop up. Please take a few moments just to complete this, as it will help us to plan any future educational activities. We will be, can I have the next slide, please? So what will we be covering this evening? So we'll be introducing our speakers as we go along. Our first speaker, Louisa Fleur, from Guy's and St Thomas, is going to explain what good patient information is. David James, head of patient projects at Prostate Cancer Research, will explain how the InfoPool evolved. We'll have a video demonstration of the InfoPool, and Dee is going to talk to us about the InfoPool from a patient's perspective. Susanna will talk to us about how to order resources that you can share. And then, as I said before, we will answer questions and answers. Now, the first test is our first poll question. So please just click the box where you heard about the InfoPool from. How are we doing? Great. So word of mouth is the top answer, colleague, followed by from us at Prostate Cancer Research, and 2 people heard from another source of information. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over to David, head of patient projects at Prostate Cancer Research.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Just for those of you who don't know who we are, we just wanted to introduce Prostate Cancer Research. As an organization, we were created back in 1988, originally as a medical research charity, but our remit really has expanded over the last number of years. We now fund over 23 high-quality innovative projects right across the UK and the USA, from such as tackling barriers to early diagnosis, and also a big part of our work is around racial disparities. And we launched a racial disparities grant call back in 2021, and now fund 8 specific projects trying to tackle and better understand and tackle the racial disparities in prostate cancer. But alongside the academic research we do, we also educate and empower people affected by prostate cancer. And this is really with a focus on driving improved shared decision-making, increasing quality of life, and reducing treatment regret. So we launched a webinar series last year called What to Expect: A Guide to Prostate Cancer in collaboration with Ipsen. And that can be found on our website. The web address is there. And that was really kind of, an 8-part series which aimed to help people understand the diagnosis of prostate cancer and receive some really incredibly positive feedback. But overall, as an organization, our vision is a world where people are free from the impact of prostate cancer. Back to you, Pauline.
So I'm going to introduce our next speaker now, Louisa Fleur. is very well known to many of us. Louisa is a urology consultant nurse at Guy's and St Thomas Hospital in London. She's authored several publications on urology and prostate cancer and presented at regional, national and international meetings on these topics. Louisa has served as a trustee for the British Association of Urological Nurses and held posts of secretary, treasurer and conference lead as part of her role. Louisa specialises in the care of men with advanced prostate cancer, with a specialist interest in androgen deprivation therapy. Her work and dedication in the field of advanced prostate cancer has been widely acknowledged and has included the Lynn Adams Award for Leadership and Innovation in Cancer Nursing, runner-up in the BGN Urology Nurse of the Year, Born Urology Team of the Year, finalist in Oncology Quality and Care Awards and Prostate Cancer Survivorship Team, and the Nightingale Award. She was awarded the Urology Foundation and Bourne's Urology Nurse of the Year Award in November 2019 for her work in providing information and support to men with advanced prostate cancer. Louisa is current chair of the Prostate Specialist Interest Group for the European Association of Urological Nurses. Welcome, Louisa.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you very much. I'm hoping I can advance these slides. Okay. Thanks so much to David and the team and to Pauline for inviting me to speak about this really important topic. And the title of my presentation is What is Good Patient Information? So I've got half an hour and what I'm going to try and cover is a little bit of background about what is good patient information, a little bit about barriers to information and the patient experience, and hopefully a little bit about what good information looks like. So I found this quote. I was looking, just sort of doing a sort of Google and looking to see, you know, what is information, what are we looking at? And this was a lovely quote from Dina Maggs, who was health librarian at the King's Fund. And she really talks about how important it is to have evidence-based information for safety, for self-management and shared decision-making, all terms which are really familiar with us. And she also really importantly mentions how important it is to engage patients and the public. And she also references the NHS long-term plan about how important it is to really support people to manage their own health and how important information is for that. But we all work in the real world. So what I really want to do is have a much more practical look at, you know, what information means to us and how we're doing at the moment. So we talk a lot about patient empowerment and it comes out in lots of policy documents, etc. And again, I did a Google and WHO defines it as a process through which people gain greater control over decisions and actions affecting their health. So I kind of thought a little bit, what does that actually mean for us and for our patients? What are they trying to take control over? What do they need to take control over? And I think really simply speaking, it's control over their diagnosis. And obviously we can't control the facts of the diagnosis, but we can certainly impact the experience of receiving a diagnosis, particularly if it's unexpected. The same with treatment decisions. We can certainly impact and help people have more power over not just what treatments are offered, but how they're offered and the information they're given in order to make good decisions about what's best for them. Certainly in terms of managing treatment effects, you know, there's a lot of money and targets involved in diagnosis and getting people to that point of treatment, but there's less support on how we can support people to manage their effects of treatment. And of course, how people live with and or beyond cancer, you know, what happens after the treatment stops or as a treatment continues for some men, and what can we do to really make that an experience that's as good as it can be. So shared decision making, again, it's a term that we use a lot, and there's a very clear definition about that. It's very much where clinicians and patients work together to choose a treatment, and it's based on evidence, what we know about treatments, but also preferences, and that's really important. And I think, you know, if you drill down a little bit, it's really about making sure patients are supported to understand what's available, but also the risks, the benefits, the alternative, the consequences, because you need all that information to make a good decision that's going to be right for you. But most importantly, it's got to be individualized. We're all different. And our values, our beliefs, our situation, our finances, our relationships, our work, all that is really important information to make sure that the decision in front of us is right. And why is that important? It's important on a kind of humanitarian basis. It's what we'd all want for ourselves. But there's also evidence to show that if we can support shared decision making, people are more likely to adhere to treatments. They're more likely to have better outcomes from treatments, and they're less likely to regret their decisions. And I think, you know, all the professionals on the call will be aware that treatment regret is a really, really difficult situation, very hard to manage and awful for people going through it. And I love this statement. It really sort of, you know, puts me in my place. And it says, you know, shared decision making, we might be the experts in cancer, we might be the experts in our particular field, but only the patient is the expert in themselves and their values and their preferences. And we can never assume that we know that unless we have very good conversations. And it really speaks to this phrase, no decision about me without me. It's very much like people have to be in as much as they want to be about decisions. So how are we doing? And that's a really good question. I think we can get sort of carried away with the policy and the plan, but actually the reality can be very different. I think we've probably all got very good opinions on how we're doing. We might be thinking we're doing really well, or we might be aware of gaps in our service. But inevitably, the best way to know is to ask people that are actually affected by it. And as Pauline said at the beginning, you know, I think we're very used to speaking to patients. You know, we're with them every day. We spend a lot of time talking, but there can be a power imbalance there. And sometimes people don't feel able to tell us how it is for them because they don't want to upset us, or they don't want to feel ungrateful or be perceived as ungrateful, or we may not just give them the opportunity for honest dialogue. And sometimes, you know, anonymizing that, doing things like focus groups and questionnaires, etc., can be a really powerful way of actually finding out what the actual reality is for lots of people that have used our services. So first of all, I'm going to talk about some work that PCR did about really looking at those two-way conversations between patients and healthcare professionals. And this project really wanted to find out more about those interactions. How are they for patients? And you know, how has it felt for them having those conversations? And they wanted to really look at evidence to make sure that we understood what patients were actually going through and how we could do better, what was needed in order to empower people. And I think for me, what's been really insightful from the work that's been done by prostate cancer research is that we've really been looking at groups of patients that maybe we haven't served that well in the past. Quite often information is aimed at perhaps people that are literate, that are able to engage. The patient information really speaks to a certain demographic, and it's really great to sort of look a bit wider and think, you know, our patients aren't like that. Our patients are like us, they're individuals. Next slide. So for this piece of work, there was mixed methods methodology. So it's two things. It was an online survey of 766 people responded, and also a series of 4 focus groups, really drilling down into different groups. So they looked at the South Asian community, the Black British, Black African and Black Caribbean community, white men from lower socioeconomic groups, and this one was specifically set in the West Midlands, and gay and bisexual men that also have prostate cancer. Next slide. So there were some really key findings, and probably what was one of the most impactful things for me was that 1 in 4 respondents said that they hadn't been given enough information to make a choice about their treatment. And that's really worrying. You know, it goes against everything that we think we're doing, probably. It certainly goes against what we're trying to do in terms of policy and the NHS plan. And what people wanted, they wanted more information about side effects of each treatment. Most importantly, they wanted information about the impact that this would have on quality of life. And they wanted more about the emotional effects of treatments and how it would affect their mental health. And this is a really big ask, because what they're actually asking is for very individualised treatment. They want to know what's going to matter for them, not for Joe Average. Next slide. So they also said that lots of people felt quite overwhelmed by how much leaflets and etc. that we gave them. And that's certainly true in my institution. We give people, we call it their brown envelope, but we try and give them as much information as we can. And by doing that, sometimes it can feel overwhelming. And we certainly have patients come back with their envelopes still intact and clearly nothing's been read. They also felt that sometimes the information they were given was quite generic. And by that, they meant that it wasn't really speaking to them. It wasn't about their lifestyle. And it might even include information about treatments that weren't actually suitable, which is quite distressing. A big key finding that came out was that lots of people felt that their sexual needs weren't really being taken seriously. And that was particularly evident if they were single, if they were a little bit older, or not in a relationship. And lots of people really felt quite overwhelmed with the responsibility of making a decision. And that's something we hear over and over again. What would you do? Is a really common question that people ask. And I think sometimes that's where shared decision making becomes really difficult. We know that it's really good for people to take an active part in that decision. We know that from research that if people do get involved in that decision making, that their outcomes are better. But for lots of people, it's an impossible choice to make. They don't understand what they're saying. I've had patients say to me, well, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor. How on earth do you expect me to choose this? You need to tell me what's going to be best for me. But the problem comes when we don't always know that, because so much of the impact depends on people's individual situations. Next slide. So if we look at the focus groups that spoke to bisexual, gay and queer men, they said loud and clear that they felt that their specific needs were not always met. They felt definitely that they felt that there was a real reluctance to talk about their sexual orientation, their sexual practices, the impact that treatments might have on them as a gay man. And they definitely said they would like more targeted information about specific treatments, particularly how it affected their lifestyle and relationships and sex life. Interesting that completely reflects some focus groups that some colleagues of mine did at Guy's, where exactly the same themes came up. It was very much felt that they were, whilst not meeting absolute homophobia, they definitely felt that they were slightly othered insofar as they had to adapt the information that they were given to us. They also felt that, they had to come out several times during their treatment journeys, and that the information that we were giving wasn't adapted to them, and they had to ask questions which they felt embarrassed to ask, and they didn't really feel like they should have to ask. Next slide. When it came to the focus group from the Black communities, there was sometimes a lack of trust in the team. There was a big kind of description about how loss of masculinity was difficult. And they also felt unable or disempowered to raise this. Respect was really important, as was peer support. And again, we've run some focus groups where I work with our Black patients on the back of our National Cancer Patient Experience Survey, where we were told that our Black patients felt less supported than their white counterparts. And our patients said the same thing. They said that they felt that our teams weren't necessarily representative, our information wasn't representative, and they felt that things like peer support, etc., was important, but the support services we set up weren't really speaking to them. Specifically, they said things like they didn't want something called a support group. They wanted something much more uplifting, something that really tackled their particular issues, and they really wanted something that was more empowering for them. Next slide. There were similar findings from the South Asian community focus groups, where they felt that they were viewed differently, and they also felt that there was a power dynamic, both in their sort of healthcare relationships and in the information. They felt it difficult to challenge or question, and they also felt that there were some issues around language barriers and accents, etc., and they felt unheard. Next slide. I think for all of us, it can be quite distressing to feel that our best efforts aren't meeting our communities. And I've just pulled out a few quotes here, which you can obviously read yourself. There were lots of positive responses as well, but I think it's really important to learn from the people that didn't have such a good experience. And you'll see that people felt that they were not listened to, that there was a bit of bias in terms of the information they were giving. They felt that they were on a bit of a conveyor belt, which lots of us will recognise given the time pressures and resource pressures we're all facing at the moment. And I think this last one as well is really interesting, that they felt overawed. It was too much information. It wasn't tailored. It wasn't what they needed. And they just felt that they weren't able to make the decisions they need to do. Next slide. There's also been some general research on this as well, and I really like this paper. And if it's a topic you're interested in, I really recommend you read it. It's from 2015, but I think it absolutely still holds true sort of 7 or 8 years later. It looked at the unmet needs for men with prostate cancer across the board, and some of the findings are here. So the researchers asked the participants about their experience of supportive care. Where do you get your support? And the participants said that a lot of it was peer support. Some of it was things like church communities and other sort of trusted people around them. Lots of them got their support online, but lots of them did get it from health professionals and specialist nurses as well. And I think what was really insightful for me is to remember that we're not the only people out there giving support, and lots of people will go online, they will go to other places for support if they're not getting what they need from us, or in addition to what they're getting from us. When they're asked about what their unmet needs were, this was also really interesting for me. They talked about the need for emotional support. They talked about the need for treatment side effects, particularly sex and urinary incontinence, and generally the need for more information. And they also said that in terms of what they thought would be better, they wanted more time with a specialist cancer nurse, which is reassuring for us, but probably something that commissioners should be aware of. And again, need for more information. And again, I think we're seeing a little dichotomy here, that some people are feeling like too much information, but yet the research says over and over again that there's not enough information. So probably the answer to that is it's just not the right information we're giving. Again, what was interesting is the researchers analysed all the responses they got, and they looked at some overarching themes that came out of all these things. Next slide. And those were overarching themes of uncertainty, reframing and timing. And when it comes to uncertainty, again, it comes back again to the fact that there were so many treatment options and outcomes, and how uncertain people were about what that meant for them, along with the severity of side effects and prognosis. And also really interesting about pathways. When are things going to happen? Who's responsible? What do I do in order to find these things out? Reframing is something that we've certainly talked about a lot, and it's about, some things can't be fixed, and sometimes it's about how we support people to adapt to this new normal, and also how we make sure that people don't have unrealistic hopes, that we're not, accidentally promising them the unpromisable, and we're not making people feel that, this is, for example, an operation and everything's going to be the same afterwards. Timing's a really interesting one again, because it's so individual. We're all aware that, at the time of diagnosis, some people really want everything that you can tell them. And for other people, things have shut down. They need to process a diagnosis. So when information is available is really, really important to people. And our healthcare system doesn't always accommodate that, because quite often the information you get is at set times during your appointments. So people really express that for them, having information when they needed it was really important as well. Next slide. So there's lots of information out there. A quick Google will show you, sites, charities, information sheets. There's huge amounts of information out there. So is that the answer? Do we just give people better leaflets? Next slide. And the answer is probably not. When we think about what is good patient information, it has to be that patients are prepared. They're aware of what's happening. They're aware of what's happening now and their next steps. They can plan ahead, and they need to be really involved. Next slide. And what is information? Quite often we think of it in terms of leaflets, but actually people get information in lots of different ways. It can be verbal, it can be one-to-one with a healthcare professional or someone else. It could be group. Lots of us run groups now because it's a really effective way of both getting information and encouraging peer support as well. Lots of information is face-to-face, but a huge amount now is online, either in the form of webinars and seminars, but also in terms of online educational resources as well. It can be written, it can be web-based, it can be video. And the type of information also is different. Some of our information is explanatory. It will explain the diagnosis, it will explain things like Gleason scores and what cancer is and pathways and options, etc., in a very factual way. But other information is advisory. It might be advising about side effects, about what you can do, about healthy living, etc. And they're subtly different, and they might know different ways of being communicated. And other information that we give is supportive. It might be about emotional support, about groups, about work, about finance. And you can see that if I was receiving that support, how it was delivered would need to be different for all those different groups. And on a given day, it might need to be given in a different format as well. Next slide. So what does it look like? What is good information? And I think it's 4 things. I think the content, format, accessibility, and reach is really important. So in terms of content, it needs to cover what the patient needs to know, but it also needs to cover what the patient wants to know as well. And we don't always know what that is. And it needs to be evidence-based. In terms of format, it needs to be in a format that the patient can understand and take in and remember. And that's going to be different for all of us. Accessibility, that's how easy it is to both access it and understand it. So it needs to be understandable to the people using it. And do we know who's using our information? Jargon free, we know that, but do we do it all the time? You know, it's really easy for jargon to creep in, and that's why it's so important that our information is co-designed, or at least has patient involvement, because whilst we are patients in some situations, when we're designing information, etc., we're health professionals, and we do need that patient voice in our information. And it needs to be an appropriate language or level of language as well. And we're going to come back to that a little bit in a minute. And then reach, the information absolutely needs to represent and speak to the populations using it. And that is so important. You know, it's for lots of our patients, you know, we all know our local population and we know who our patients are. And it's really important that our information represents them, because if you don't see yourself in a piece of information, you're not going to think it speaks to you. Next slide. So what are the barriers? And these are just some that I've thought of, and there will be more. So poor health literacy, we're going to come on to later, as we will learning styles and self-efficacy. But I put in expertise of providers, and I think that's really important. I'm a nurse, you know, I'm not a writer, I'm not a journalist, and I'm certainly not an expert in health education. So sometimes I think we need to recognise our limitations and perhaps draw on the expertise of people in whom the education, etc., is actually their field of expertise. And I've certainly learned a lot in education by doing that. I think different information needs is really important. You know, our local populations will have different needs. And again, it's about engaging our populations to find out what they want as well as what they need. Next slide. So health literacy is really, really interesting. So again, going back to the World Health Organization, it's about the personal characteristics and social resources that people need in order to understand, access, appraise, and use information. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that people need to understand what we're saying to them. And it's really important to know our populations, but across England, 43% of working age adults don't understand health information. And this is 61% if there's any numerical component. So a lot of what we write and we say isn't easily understandable to people. And this makes sense. You know, if you write something down and ask, you know, your partner or your friends, lots of people won't understand things that you think are really evident. We also need to think of reading ages. You know, when we write information, normally we assume a reading age of somewhere between 9 and 13, because most people don't have a good reading age. And if you add in anxiety and unfamiliarity with the subject, that's going to be a real issue. Next slide. So why is it important? Well, it's important for lots of reasons. We know that people with lower levels of health literacy are going to be less confident in talking to us. Lots of people feel disempowered anyway in a healthcare setting. But if you add in the fact that they don't feel confident in what we're talking about, then there's going to be an even greater power imbalance there. They're less likely to understand written information, and we rely so heavily on that. So if they don't understand it, how are they going to be able to make good decisions? They're also less motivated to engage in decisions about their health, which is understandable if they don't understand what we're selling to them. And they're less likely to tell us if they don't understand. And that's really important to know. And that all comes from NHS England a couple of years ago. Next slide. Now, self-efficacy is another really interesting thing. So self-efficacy really speaks to the decision-making, but it also speaks to how we support people to manage side effects. So self-efficacy is really your ability or your perceived ability to implement changes. So it's our inner sense of control about whether we think we can do things. Now, for lots of people, in order to understand, to make decisions, to make changes, information is absolutely essential. You need information in order to do that. Next slide. And an easy way to think of it is you get information, you get strategies, and then you make an action. But actually, for most of us, that doesn't happen. Lots of us know what we need to do in order to be fit, lose weight, etc. But knowing it and knowing what we need to do, it doesn't always result in action. Next slide. And the reason for that is this self-efficacy. It's the person's ability to actually take on board the information and strategies and convert that into action. Next slide. Now, luckily, we've got a lot of information about this. There was some great work done in the 80s, actually, by Bandura about self-efficacy. And here's some definitions here about what it means. It's about their ability to implement behaviours. It's about their personal judgment. So it's not something you can give someone. It's a personal thing inside us about how well we can execute action. And it's also absolutely essential. Self-efficacy is central about how you choose what to do, how much effort you put into it, and what happens when things go wrong, as they inevitably do. But luckily, Bandura also gave us some tips on how to support self-efficacy. And click again, David. So there are 4 main influences that can actually improve self-efficacy for us all. And here they are. So one of them, direct mastery, is really about performing activity. So reading about how to do something is never going to be as powerful as actually being shown practically how to do it and doing it. So exercise, for example, you can talk to people about breathing exercises, about resistant exercises, about cardio, but having them do it is a much more powerful way for them to actually implement it. Observing other people like you performing something successfully is really important as well. I'm a middle-aged white woman without a prostate, so my testimony might be fine, but there's nothing more powerful than one of your peers talking to you about the fact that, yes, I did this and it worked. I did this and this is how I did it. Being influenced that you're capable is really important, and things like motivational interviewing, behaviour change theories can be really helpful with this, as is getting feedback. So any information strategy needs to remember this. Giving people the information isn't enough. You also need to be thinking about how we get strategies and how we actually improve people's self-efficacy to actually implement them as well. Next slide. And the other barrier is learning styles and information needs. And this is, I like this because it's simple, and it's called VARC, which is the acronym, and it's the different ways that people learn and take in information. And lots of us have different styles, and it may be situational as well, but some people are visual. So they're like illustrations, pictures, etc., and words as well, but they need to see it in order to sort of take it in. For some people, it's hearing. They like seeing things through discussion, through groups, through chatting, and perhaps videos, etc., where they hear people saying it rather than the spoken word rather than the written word. And it's interesting because it says here, you may see people read out things that are written down, and my husband does this. I'll say it quietly because he's downstairs, but when he's reading something, I hear him muttering it as well, because he's very much an auditory learner. And then reading and writing, it can sound a bit similar to the first one, but it's basically a preference for words. So people that like information leaflets, they like to see things written down, and that's how they learn best. And then the kinesthetic is people that like experience and practice. So they like simulations, they like to actually do things in order to learn them. And as I said, most of us are a combination of those, but for most of us, we'll see a preference in those, and we'll see something that works for us best. And it's exactly the same. We're patients, it's the same for our patients as well. We've all got different ways of learning. And so patient information probably needs to take that into account, and remember that we're not all people that are just written. We're reading and writing people. Next slide. Now, representation, I think, is absolutely fascinating. So in terms of representation, as I said before, if you don't see yourself in information, then it's not for you, and you may not be inclined to take on that information because it may seem that it's for somebody else. And there's lots, this is really nice. So the Patient Information Forum do some lovely information on inclusivity. And some of it is about language and tone and pictures. And, pictures are really simple. If all you see is older white middle class men on pictures, then and that's not you, then you may not feel the information's for you. So representation of pictures is important, but it's absolutely not the be all and end all. There's a lot around cultural sensitivity, about language, etc. But what it comes down to in the end of the day is that if you don't involve patients, if you don't involve the community you're serving in developing information, then you're probably going to miss the mark, because you don't know what you don't know. So anything that involves co-design, involves patients being asked their opinion and having an integral part in the development, goes a lot further than just changing the skin color in photographs, for example. Next slide. So hopefully I've kept time. Yes, I have. Brilliant. So I think there's a huge amount of information out there about what is good patient information, etc. And it can be confusing with time short, resource short, etc. But I think there's some really key learning from this. I think we have to take on board that despite our best efforts, many of our men, our patients, are still dissatisfied with the information that they've got for whatever reason. We know what good information looks like. It needs to be evidence-based. It needs to be about what men want as well as what they need. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be in the right format and representative. And also that we've all got different learning styles. And that it has to include some consideration about self-efficacy, and patient testimonies, etc., are really good examples of this. So I'll stop there, and just next slide, David, to make sure, yeah, I have stopped. And very happy to take questions either now or at the end. Pauline, just let me know what you want me to do.
Thank you, Louisa. That was absolutely brilliant. We'll take questions at the end if that's all right with you. So now David is going to come back and speak to us again, or explain further.
Thank you, Pauline. And thank you so much, Louisa, for that really broad and important introduction to where we are today, and really why why we felt the info pool was so important. So I'm not going to dwell on this slide too long, but this is really just to kind of recap some of the things that Louisa said. We know health literacy is a big problem in this country. About half of the population, give or take, depending on different types of the way the information is presented, is thought to have health literacy, and that really leads to some problems. You see these sort of different problems: increased visits to A&E, increased hospital stays, reduced adherence to treatment, as well as higher mortality rates for people with low health literacy as well. And we know that that's a problem, and we really wanted to sort of see how could we set out to address this. So just as Louisa mentioned, we did a large amount of research leading up to this, and there were 5 kind of key problems we set out to identify and to solve. So the first was, we know there's a wealth of written information out there, but it's not necessarily suitable for everyone. Those with lower health literacy, those who have different learning styles, the information wasn't always suitable. The second is prostate cancer. The pathway is quite a complicated pathway. There are some cancers, some diseases where you have basically one choice, one type of treatment or drug, and it's kind of take it or leave it. But for prostate cancer, that's not the case. You often have to make a decision around which drug you're going to take, which treatment you're going to have, and that can be really overwhelming for patients. Who, as we said, they say, look, well, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, how am I supposed to make that decision? And then, as Tony, this quote that Tony sort of said in one of our bits of research once, it's always stuck with me. So it's navigating your way through treatment options is horrendous, particularly options that they never tell you about. We hear from patients that that they didn't know about this treatment that was available. Maybe it wasn't in their hospital, or maybe it just slipped the mind of the healthcare professional, or maybe they just forgot. But for whatever reason, they're not armed with the full information they need to be able to make a proper decision about their treatment. As Louisa mentioned, that for certain populations, but particularly the Black community, given their higher incidence of prostate cancer, the information out there was felt that rarely addressed their needs. They didn't see it as culturally relevant, and their involvement in co-development was really kind of very low. The fourth problem was we heard from patients feeling that they were being rushed into making decisions about their treatment. And we know that's not ideal. Finally, it was the case of, in terms of research and clinical trials, we know there's this lottery of, depending where you live in the country, whether or not you have a member of a healthcare professional who is really on top of the latest research, or maybe you're at a sort of great teaching hospital that's does all the trials. But if you're not that person, you don't have that access to that information, or that healthcare professional, then how do you find out about the latest treatment and research? And our research showed us that patients want to know about clinical trials earlier. They don't know where to find that information. And so it can be a real crapshoot as to whether or not you get the right information. And so that's really why we launched the Info Pool, which is our new interactive patient information educational platform. Like to here just thank the National Lottery Community Fund for their support, as this has been supported by a grant from the National Lottery. And so what I'd like to just do now, before we give you a sort of a full kind of demonstration of the Info Pool, is show you this short animation that we've developed, which is going to live on the homepage of the Info Pool, and really be a kind of an introduction to what the Info Pool is and how it can help users of the site.
Meet Bob, David, and Raj. Bob has recently been diagnosed with prostate cancer. The doctor talked to Bob about his treatment choices, but he has forgotten the details. Bob is unsure what treatment choices are available to him. This is where the Info Pool comes in. Bob enters some information about himself. He is shown some treatment choices. He uses the comparison tool to help him compare treatments. Next, Bob chooses which treatment he wants to learn more about. Finally, Bob discovers other people's stories. This helps him consider which treatment might be best for him. Now, back to David. His doctor just told him that his PSA was raised. His doctor has referred him to hospital for more tests. David is worried. He wants to understand what tests he might have. He came to the right place. The Info Pool can help. David can learn about the different tests and scans he may have. This helps put his mind at ease. And then there is Raj. Raj was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. He's wondering if he's eligible for any clinical trials. Raj is in a difficult situation. Finding the right clinical trial is not easy. But it is much easier with the Info Pool's clinical trial finder. Bob, David, and Raj. With the help of the Info Pool, they feel more prepared and informed. Find out more, and when you are ready, come share your story on the Info Pool.
And before we go on to the next bit, I just thought that was a nice introduction to the site. But I think it's really important to give a pause and a shout out to all the people who've been involved in this. We've been lucky to have a wonderful group of patients who've been involved in the co-design and development right from the start. We set up 2 patient working groups now we have over about 25 people affected by prostate cancer who are on those working groups. And as much as we're here, Prostate Cancer Research here, talking to you about this, this is really their platform. It wouldn't have been possible without them, and we're very lucky that we're going to be joined by one of them later on to talk about his experience. And also, we have a wonderful clinical advisory board, a multidisciplinary group of clinicians who have inputted into the development of this site. And so I just want to make sure that this is an effort that's involved a huge variety of people that's gone into producing this. And so a big thank you to all of them for making this possible. So what we'd like to now show you is what we're calling our how-to guide. And this is a short video, slightly longer than this video, about the site and really sort of to help healthcare professionals understand how the site works. Welcome to the how-to guide for the Info Pool for healthcare professionals. So welcome to the homepage of the Info Pool. What you'll see here in the top right-hand corner is the menu bar. where you can access the different parts of the site. But you can also access them, and where we encourage people to access them is here on the home page. When you scroll down, you'll see the 4 really different user journeys, the main user journeys for use on the info pool. And as you will scroll further down, you'll see a carousel of different patient stories, ever-changing patient stories. But what we'd like to do today is talk to you about the different user journeys. So I'm going to click here on Understanding Treatment Choices. And what this will do is take you to the treatment tool. Now, the treatment tool is really at the heart of the info pool because it's an interactive, guided tool which will help patients do really 4 key things. One is understand their possible treatment choices. The second is to compare these treatments. The third is to find out more about any treatment. And then the fourth is to find out what might happen if their cancer keeps growing after treatment. So, of course, there's a bit of an explanation here on the home page of the treatment tool, including the fact that the treatments may not always apply in every situation, and any other caveats which might be important. So, for example, the treatments shown currently are only those which have been approved for use on the NHS in England and Wales. So, one would click I understand, let's get started, and get taken into the main part of the site. So, what you'll see on the right-hand side, or if you're on a mobile, which will be further down, is a question. So you were asked, the patient will be asked a small number of questions to really tailor the information that they're then going to be shown. And on the left-hand side, what you'll see is an image or an illustration or a video which we'll have added to the site, and it's been designed to help people answer the question on the right-hand side. So let's take an example of someone who's not got metastatic disease. So that's this first question, is trying to find out whether they have metastatic disease or not. And they're going to be asked a series of questions, so that here, let's imagine they have a Gleason score of 6, a PSA of 5, and still T2. So what we've defined now is that they are in the Cambridge Prognostic Group 1 or low risk category. And so then there's a piece of advice which comes from NICE guidance. So in this situation, we all know active surveillance is normally recommended, but there are also other treatments which patients should be aware of as well. Now, at this point, the user has 2 options. They can visit the treatment comparison tool, or they can click on any one of these treatments below to learn more about that treatment. So let's click on the treatment comparison tool, for example. So what that's done here is that's loaded up this treatment comparison tool with the different treatments that were included there. So as you'll see, we've got the 5 different treatments that were shown to the user. And what you can do now is compare them at a very sort of top level using these different comparators which we have developed with our patient advisory board. And at this point, one could, if let's say you're interested in active surveillance, you could read more and get taken to the page of active surveillance, or you can go back and decide here you'd like to sort of continue this journey and so learn about active surveillance this way. So let's click on active surveillance, and so there's a bit of information on active surveillance, what it is, and then a link out if you want to find out all about active surveillance. So let's do that for a moment. So let's click active surveillance, and we're taken to the treatment page on active surveillance. And there are 4 parts to this page in every treatment page: the about section, the risk section, the impact section, and the stories section. So in the about section, we have some sort of quite top-line information about the treatment, including normally animation or some simple information on the treatment, some key information, who can have it, what are the benefits of treatment, and then a patient quote, someone who's shared their experience on the site with us. Then if you keep scrolling further down, there's some frequently asked questions if, say, one wanted to do more of a deeper dive into active surveillance, and these address some of the main questions patients have asked us. Now, the risk section first is an explanation of actually what risk is and why it's important to consider, and then the different risks of that treatment. So in the case of active surveillance, we have the physical risks, and then we also have a section on the sexual risks as well, including where this information comes from. Now, the impact section and the stories section are really the heart of the info pool. Now, users who've shared their experience of this treatment with the info pool, their data is aggregated together. And so in this situation, we have from users of the info pool who told us about their experience of being on active surveillance, we know 48 out of 100 have told us their physical and social well-being was impacted a lot. on the 33 out of 100, however, said their effect on relationships was impacted a lot. And what we have are 7 different categories which are based on the experience of people who've shared their experience with the info pool, who've had this treatment. And this is dynamically updated every time someone shares their experience of treatment. Once it goes through our moderation and review process from our clinical nurse specialist, it then automatically updates into this part of the site. But that's where the data is aggregated together. The story section, this is where you get those individual stories. So what you'll see here is all the people who've shared their experience with the info pool. And as you can see, there are some that have pictures and some don't. And that's because people can choose to share their experience publicly or anonymously. And so you see all the different stories which have been designed so that you can filter. Let's say you're a black man looking for other experiences from other black men. Here there are stories and experiences that you can choose to click on and dive further into. Let's say you're looking for other gay and bisexual men. Here are 2 stories from other gay and bisexual men who've had experience of active treatment. So these stories are continuing to be added on literally a daily basis, and so this site's going to continue to grow with more stories and more experiences. And coming up to the menu bar for a moment, what you'll see is you can actually jump straight to the personal stories section. You don't have to go through the treatment tool. And here you'd be able to filter these stories again by ethnicity or age or sexual orientation, and then as well also sort of directly by the treatment someone has had. So there are lots of different ways that you can access these stories and experiences. So let's take an example. Looking for someone who's had chemotherapy as a black man. Here we can click on Michael, and you'll see Michael's sharing his experience of hormone therapy. He has sharing experience on chemotherapy, and we've also got a video of Michael talking about his experience of chemotherapy as well. So there are lots of different ways that people can share their story, both through written text, but also through videos. And we have hundreds of videos and experiences on the site. Now, going back to the treatment tool for a moment, we mentioned obviously there's the opportunity to find out what might happen if that treatment stops working, or if you just stop, in this case, active surveillance. So then you could scroll further down and you'd see the different treatment options which are now available to you. Again, you could choose to compare these treatments, and it would be preloaded with these 4 different types of treatment. Or let's say you want to, you're interested in radical prostatectomy. You could then come to the page on radical prostatectomy. Here you can watch the short animation that we've created on this, or you can click and find out all about radical prostatectomy, and you'll see a page similar to active surveillance, a treatment page with an about, a risk, an impact, and a stories section where you can find different stories and experiences from men who've had radical prostatectomies. Now, coming back, you might have noticed there was Explore Possible Clinical Trials, and that's been layered throughout this treatment tool, and that's because our research has shown that people want to know about clinical trials earlier. But you can also access this clinical trials section from the main part of the site, or also in the menu bar. Now, if you click through here, you're taken to a page on all about clinical trials with a short animation about trials and the phases. But what's really exciting here is our clinical trial finder. So if you click here, you're taken to a site which we've developed in partnership with Ancora.ai, where one can enter their postcode. Let's choose a random postcode in London. Is that maybe made up postcode? I know that is real. And you could search then for different clinical trials based on the geography. So what you'll see is there's a step-by-step series of questions which you'll be prompted to answer. I'm just giving a few random answers for now. And what happens is eventually, once you've completed those about 9 or 10 questions, you're going to take them to a page that looks like this. And so if you're encouraged to save your questionnaire, when new clinical trials are added, we can contact you and let you know that there's new trials that have been added to the site. And we'll click next. What you'll see here in this next tip is that these trials have been filtered based on geography, on different phases, and whether they're currently actively recruiting or not. There's also an export results button over on the right-hand side as well. So what's important here is that we've filtered based on a geography of about 50 miles, but you might not be able to travel that far, or you might be willing to travel much further. Obviously the power is in your hands. But let's say I'm only interested in trials within a 10-mile radius, and I watched the animation. I'm not interested in phase 2 trials. So you'll see right now what we have are 3 different trials within a 10-mile radius that match those criteria I filled in the questionnaire, that match that inclusion-exclusion criteria. and then I could simply export the results and take those and have a conversation with my healthcare team about these different trials and whether or not I might be eligible for any of these. So now going back to the homepage of the info pool. So we mentioned the learning about testing and diagnosis. So that is a similar guided tool. I'll show you this very quickly. There's a similar kind of guided tool to the treatment tool, and it's focused on supporting people looking at the risk of prostate cancer, where we will sort of signpost out to Prostate Cancer UK's risk checker, or walking them through the different tests and scans they might have if they're referred into their hospital by their GP. So helping to really kind of allay some of the fears and anxieties that people have when they're first, being either going to their GP to discuss symptoms, or if they've just been referred onto hospital and want to know what might happen, what scans they might have, and what tests they might have. And then the final user journey on this homepage is living with side effects. So if we click on the living with side effects section, a very simple page with stories and resources. Now the stories are the individual experiences from patients sharing their experience of side effects and tips and advice they have for others. So you see here on the right hand side 4 different categories of side effects. So let's look at sexual function. Here we've got all the different stories from different men who've had issues with sexual function. And again, I don't know, let's choose, I'm looking for black men who've had issues with sexual function, and we can choose to filter based on that. Or let's say we were looking for black gay men in their 40s. The options are obviously really endless. And of course, if you click the resources page, what we have here is a signposting page to all sorts of different resources from third-party organizations to support with side effects and to help people, from support groups to webinars to organizations around the country that can support patients with side effects. As I mentioned, the last thing, just to point out, this menu bar in the top right-hand corner. You can access all of these different user journeys through the menu bar. You can jump straight to the treatment comparison page, the personal stories page, clinical trials finder, the treatment tool. It's all here either accessible on the right-hand side in the menu bar or back on the home page as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this whirlwind tour through the info pool. Please do go on and explore, have a look around. We're really looking forward to your feedback, and we hope you find this a useful addition to the information that you can share with your patient community. Thank you all very much for indulging us there and for listening to me babble on for 10 minutes. But I hope that was helpful for you to understand the different parts of the info pool and how it can support patients through those different user journeys. Conscious of the time, we're not going to dwell long here on this, but we've already had some really fantastic feedback from users of the site who've shared with us their experiences thus far. You see things like it's really easy to understand, very simple language, easy to navigate, and that was really important. It's this kind of guided step-by-step tool to help people get to the information they need and that information in a bite-sized way. And then these are just a couple of things. We're very proud to have been endorsed by the British Association of Urological Nurses and also received our patient information form PIFTIC accreditation for the site as well. And we've also had some really great feedback from healthcare professionals as well, including from Professor Rakesh here, who said HandSound's the best patient-facing tool I've ever seen. So with that, I'm now going to pass back to Pauline, and I'm really excited for the next speaker.
So now it's time to welcome our patient representative, or our service user, as another phrase for Dee. To introduce Dee, Dee's 63 years young and originally from Guyana in South America. In his youth, he studied ballet, but as you will read, he has not left his dancing years behind him. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2015 and underwent a non-nerve sparing radical prostatectomy in March 2016. As the ever-determined individual, he received a merit from the Royal Academy of Dance in February of this year, after taking his level 2 certificate in classical ballet repertoire in December 2022. Well done and welcome, Dee.
Thank you. What would you like me to talk about?
Oh, hello. Dee, would you be able to talk about, in particular, around the time of your diagnosis, the information that was given to you and how you dealt with that information to use it to decide on your treatment and what we could have done better as health professionals?
Thank you so much, Pauline, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I was diagnosed in December 2015, and I think sometimes the health professionals forget that it's quite a severe shock to be told that you have cancer, especially if you're the first person in your family to have been diagnosed with cancer. I wasn't really given a choice. I was just told that, look, you know, you need to have your prostate taken out and it needs to happen soon. I had no idea of other treatments or anything at all. I felt quite ushered and rushed into that decision. I also kept on asking my doctor, you know, can you explain that in layman's terms, please? Because you guys have studied at medical school and you have your jargon, but the person, you know, laymen, they don't know. And I found that really quite off-putting and constantly had to say, but what does that mean in real terms? You did mention that in your presentation. I was happy about that. It really took a lot out of me, just to be told that's it, right? I was aware of the side effects, but not really. And I just thought, my God, you know, this is a human being here, someone with feelings and emotions, not just a name on a piece of paper. That's why I'm so impressed with this InfoPool website, because if I had been given a choice or the opportunity to see the options available to me, you know, I would have taken it. You know, I would not have gone through with having my prostate removed if I knew that there was other alternatives, because it has affected my quality of life a great deal. I'm incontinent and I suffer with erectile dysfunction. I'm comfortable to say that now, but initially I wasn't, because I just felt so less than as a man. Something so important was taken away from me. How is that? Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can now.
I'm sorry. Thank you. That was brilliant. So were you given any information when you were told that you needed a radical prostatectomy?
No, I was just guided to a seminar with lots of other men, pre-operation seminar and post-operation seminar.
And how did you feel about being in a group of other men talking about the side effects in particular?
It was impersonal. There was, you know, there was no one-to-one real interaction, which I needed at the time, because, and there were some men there with their wives, and you don't want to open up in front of strangers in that sort of environment.
Yeah, I understand. And how do you feel it would have been different if, because it's what, 8 years ago now, isn't it? Or
Nearly.
7 years ago now, yeah.
Nearly.
Yeah, and of course we didn't have an info pool then. Yeah.
Why?
Why, yes. And so how do you feel having the info pool, how would you feel that would have affected your journey?
Well, as I said, it would have given me options and choices, because once I found out the the scary part that non-nerve sparing might occur, that really, you know, made me freeze. And I would have liked to have looked at other options and discussed it and made sure, like in my video for Infopool, I said, you know, take someone with you when you have your appointments. I would also suggest, you know, having someone with you when you're going through the Infopool as well.
Yeah, yes. And you've left your story, and I mean, you must feel that listening to other people's stories would help, not only in how to make a decision, but how about living with the side effects? Do you feel having those stories would have helped you?
Very much so, because there was no one really to help, and I had to ask, and I eventually got some therapy, which helped. But, you know, to hear someone's story, how to deal with certain things, you know, when you eventually end up in bed with someone, to have a towel there and all little personal things like that.
Yeah, little tips.
Mm.
Hey, can I ask you, this is probably going to be my final question for you. If you had a nurse sitting in front of you today, giving you information, what tip would you give to them in order to help other patients?
Please don't view this as being disrespectful, but
We don't think it's disrespectful at all. It helps us to do things better.
I think nurses and some health professionals have become emotionally numb to the sensitivity of the situation, to be a little bit more sensitive and realize that there is a scared human being sat next to you who has no idea of the journey ahead. And not to use all of these big words, just to keep it as simple as possible and to be sympathetic. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your thoughts. We're very grateful for you joining us today. Are you able to stay for some questions at the end?
Yes, but I do have to leave at 7:15. And great to be a part of this project. And I really, really admire David, Harriet and the team. They've really done a fantastic job. I'm not just saying that, but I'm really impressed. And I've already guided 4 people to the info pool. Thank you.
Thank you. And just in case you go before we actually stop talking, Dee, thank you very much again for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Bye. So now I'm going to introduce Susanna Ramsey. She is now going to talk about the resources that are available to health professionals.
Thank you, Pauline. Hello, everybody. Good evening. We have put together a welcome pack of information to help you signpost patients to the Infopool. And that will consist of 250 business cards, 500 A5 flyers that you can hand out to patients to inform them about the Infopool, 3 A3 and 3 A4 laminated posters that you can display in waiting areas, and a digital download copy that you can copy and paste that you can put into follow-up letters for in the clinics. If you want to register now, you can use the QR code. That will work. That is live. Alternatively, you can go onto our website on the pcr.org.uk HCP's welcome pack, or of course you can contact me directly. And I think we have a poll coming up next, do we, David? Yeah, thank you. So having seen what you've seen, I mean, I hope you're as excited as we are about the Infopool. Would you recommend the Infopool to your patients? So that will be either yes, maybe, or no. Thank you, everybody. Over to you, Pauline.
That's good to see that most people would recommend the info pool to patients. Thank you for that. I just need to shut this down. Okay, so that's Susanna's contact details, so you can contact her directly if you want further information. Q&A now. We've just got a few minutes for Q&A. So I think the first question is from Lisa, who's asking, where does the data for the info pool come from, and will it be regularly updated? That's a question for you, David. And they also ask a second question, how is this different to the Predict tool?
Sorry, I did that rookie thing where I was talking to myself on mute. That's a great question, Lisa, thank you. So in terms of the data which comes into the impact section, that's coming directly from patients who've experienced a treatment. So we have already, at the time of launch, we had about 600 stories and experiences from patients on the site. And that was really important. We said, we wanted to make sure we had a good sort of number before launch, and that number is continuing to grow. So we're doing a lot of outreach through support groups, healthcare professionals, direct to patients, and so that number just continues to go up every day. The second part was, how is this different to the Predict tool? So we link out to the Predict tool at different points. I think the Predict tool is a fantastic tool. What it offers is something which I think many of you will probably appreciate is quite a complicated tool. It's best done with a healthcare professional. The idea is this is a tool that anyone can use, and it's simple, and it guides you to the right information in the right way. And I think there was a third part to the question, which was, will it be regularly updated? Yes, absolutely. So in terms of if NICE guidance changes or new treatment options become available, the aim is we will update this very regularly, and more generally the content. We're doing a yearly review of the content on the site, and in terms of patient stories, our team are gathering new patient stories, new videos, creating new videos constantly. So those are going to continue to be updated. And we're doing a lot of work with different groups in the Black community, as also outreach in the LGBT community, as well as to men all over the country, to continue to make sure that these stories and experiences continue to kind of grow on the site, because we know that's the real unique richness of the info pool, is the patient experiences. They're so powerful.
Thank you, David. Louisa, I have a question for you now. What would your top tips be for when giving patients information, particularly information so that they can make a decision when they've got a choice about treatments?
I think my top tip would be to just take the time to find out what's important to them and sort of assess what sort of information is going to be helpful for them. And I think we've all been guilty of relying on the good old information leaflet, and I think assessing people's kind of self-efficacy and all that sort of thing is really important, although difficult to do. So I think things like holistic needs assessment are good, because it does in some way ask that question of what's important to the person and what the particular barriers to a good decision might be. So I think just taking the time to sit back and just work out what the patient wants from you in terms of information, and then take that as a starting point and then build around that.
Thank you. David, there's a couple of questions around focal therapy.
Absolutely.
So somebody's asked, will we be covering focal therapy? And somebody says, what about focal therapy? Yeah,
no, that's a great question. So at the moment, the tool is based on NICE guidance. And so, as most of you will probably know, NICE guidance does not explicitly include focal therapy at this point in time. However, we are cognizant of, there was a new HTA produced on April 5th by NICE, which expanded access to focal therapy from beyond research into a much wider group of centers. So We are in discussions with our clinical advisory board. We have meetings with a number of different persons who, clinical advisory clinicians who practice focal therapy, and we're currently working through the best way to put that on the site, both within the treatment tool and others. And we've actually already started gathering patient stories and experiences on the site as well, from people who've had HIFU and cryotherapy and others. So it will be coming. We're just trying to make sure that we do this in a way that really addresses the fact that focal therapy is not at the moment the evidence is not there in terms of the long-term effectiveness compared to radical treatments, and so we just want to make sure that the way we do that and the way we show this information is beneficial to patients, and is sensitive to the evidence that exists out there. But it is definitely coming. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you. Just going to ask 2 more questions, but both of them I think are for you, David. Is this for newly diagnosed patients only?
Great question. Thanks, Marika, for that. No, absolutely not. On the treatment tool, you will see there's also a section that guides down the metastatic route. I guess that probably also is, how is this different from the predict tool, is we're also trying to address for metastatic prostate cancer patients as well. So there is a section for people with metastatic disease, and there's obviously, of course, the living with side effects for people to come back who are struggling with side effects, or just want to hear tips and advice from others, how they dealt with the side effects. So we see it that people at many different points on the pathway being able to come and utilize the resources on the site, as well. Of course, the clinical trial finder. It's really important. For many people, that's not something they necessarily want to consider a diagnosis initially. It's something that after treatment might stop working, they might want to come back and kind of explore or kind of explore at different points on their pathway as well. So I think it's for people at many points in the journey. And finally, also within the tool itself, we go that sort of step of helping people understand what might be next. So it's not just if you've first been diagnosed, maybe you've had a radical prostatectomy and there's a recurrence. You want to know what might happen, what are your options after recurrence, and so there is that built in within the tool. So it's definitely not just for people newly diagnosed.
Thank you. And I'm mindful that we've overrun, but I think this is an important question. Kai's asking, he says this is an excellent digital initiative, but how do we use the info pool with patients who are not digital users? Yeah,
that's a great question. So we're working with Tackle Prostate Cancer and their support groups. We're working with healthcare professionals who run support groups in hospital settings. We're looking to develop an info pool champion model where someone is able to sort of support people who are not digitally literate, who are able, guide them through the process and give them access to the site, help them in that kind of, as Dee was saying, have that buddy there to kind of maybe support you as you go through the info pool. So that's one way. We're also looking at sort of targeting sons and daughters and partners as well, to make sure that maybe if the person who's been diagnosed doesn't feel comfortable, but there's someone there who can maybe help them in a domestic setting to access the site. Finally, we're also looking to adapt our Treating Prostate Cancer booklet and include some of the key findings that come through the site, come through these users sharing their experiences, and including some of those in our booklet as well, so that for those who prefer, or don't feel comfortable in a digital space, to at least some of the findings and best practices and tips and things that have come from people sharing on the info pool can exist in a non-digital space as well. But we're also, open to any suggestions anyone else might have. We're keen to continue to grow this and learn. And so we welcome your feedback and thoughts on the best ways to do that as well.
Thank you very much. So it's time to close the meeting. Thank you for sticking with us. I think there's one more slide, is there? Thank you. So the webinar is going to be run again. This one will be led by consultants, urologists and oncologists. So if you have colleagues who've missed today, they've got 2 opportunities of joining in again. So they can join this one on the 31st, or you'll all have a link to the recording of the webinar from today. I need to thank our speakers, and thank you to Louisa, Dee, our patient, and Susanna and David, and to thank PCR for developing this resource and for teaching us about it today. Don't forget, when you leave the webinar, there'll be an evaluation form pop up. Please do complete that so that we can improve what we're doing. And we hope to see you again in the near future. Thank you and good night.